Hello, let's have a look at wars in history and how we can group them and what this has to do with nuclear weapons and about getting rid of nuclear weapons. So I suggest that we take a very high level view now, and it's about that I suggest there's like three distinct phases of war in human history. And we just look at the more recent history. We don't really go to the Stone Ages and stuff. Yeah? But let's say there is something in human history. This is World War I and World War II, which is like very distinct. And so I suggest that we have like something before World War I. Then we have the period of World War I and II, which is actually something like the same. World War I was actually really laying the seed for World War II. And then we have all the time after World War II and where we are now today. So let's just have a look and start. So let's go to before World War I. There was really like, there's some sayings of some really diplomatic people that war is only like the extension of diplomacy. So at that time, war was seen as really something normal. It was seen as patriotic to be inside of a war, take part in a campaign. It was sort of a form of diplomacy. It was totally considered normal, and if one country, another country had a dispute and they were settling it with a war, so invading each other, also like taking land, going into the whole world and conquering land and increasing your territory. That was like completely normal. That was like the modus operandi, and nobody was really thinking of anything that this is really a bad, really very bad idea. So it was like, war was like really normal. Yeah? So that would be like the summary. It was very patriotic. A lot of people were participating and all this kind of stuff. And war wasn't yet really very high level developed and machined. Of course, there were lots and lots of casualties, but the ways we engineered killing later haven't been arrived. Okay, so then we come to World War I. And there were tensions in Europe, and so there started war, and then initially there was the idea, oh, we take little territory and the usual thing, but there were some inventions, which especially there was the machine gun, now an invention which hasn't been really in wide operation before. So there was a machine gun. It was a machine type of system to kill people. Also artillery had evolved, but that really wasn't, from my point of view, one of the key factors, but really this machine gun. Because, the modus operandi at that time was that like soldiers with their rifles were running into the other direction, to the enemy, and then trying to assault the enemy. But the problem was when you are running there and you put up some barbed wire and obstacles, so the people are running, and you have a machine gun, you can just kill an enormous amount of people with just this machine gun. Like 2 or 3 people with a machine gun can kill in hundreds, and so you could, with just one machine gun, you could stop the advance of the enemy. And that led to the problem that they had like completely on the Western Front, it was like completely more or less stable, and they were like shooting each other and killing each other and so on. So it is said, I just quote some figures from Wikipedia, that there have been around 10 million people dead, military people, soldiers, in the World War I, plus 9 million civilian population. The figures are like not so exact, but look it up. So it's like 10 million military personnel died in the war. So that's lots and lots of people, lots and lots of soldiers who lost their life. And that was like really seen still to be normal. But, the whole thing was like a complete shock. And when I was young, I still saw the people who were having these bands, because they were blind, and the bands actually come from the sign which was used for a chemical weapon, and the chemical weapon actually blinded people. So, World War I, really bad, and that was the first time that there was like an industrialized way of killing each other. So, and because, there was a Versailles Treaty, and everybody in Germany was really feeling that this Versailles Treaty was not really a very good way to be treated. So, like, practically the outcome of World War I was like a brief period of peace, but rearmament everywhere, and then that led to World War II. So we didn't really learn the message as human beings. And then we started World War II. And now, industrialization of killing each other was like more involved. Now we had the tank, the armored vehicle like a tank was available in World War I, but just not really on a high technology level, didn't really make a big impact. But now in World War II, tanks were playing a big role. The Germans were using tanks and mobile forces really efficiently. They had also millions of horses, by the way. It's not only that the Germans were conquering everything just with the tanks. They had like trucks, tanks, and millions of horses. But, killing really in very large scales was even more industrialized, even more people were killed. So it said that 23 million people, I just again quote the average of Wikipedia, military personnel died, and 53 million people died from the effects of war, civilians. Only Germany alone is estimated to have 5 million military personnel killed in the war. So, and these were really absolutely exceptional numbers. And of course, at the end of the Second World War, the nuclear weapon was invented, the nuclear bomb, which allowed you to kill tens of thousands of people and nearly 100,000 of people in one single moment of time. It's just one weapon, which was still big and large, but considerable. You just kill an entire city and 100,000 people with just one device, which is able to be carried by one aircraft. So we had reached a new level of being able to kill each other. And at least after now World War I and World War II together came to an end, there was the idea of, hey, the way what we did with Germany, the Versailles Treaty and stuff, which was put there, it wasn't really that much of a good idea, but let's try to build something like a new world order. Let's try to find a system where nations can live better together. And, especially, for example, the United States were supporting Germany, West Germany, really much. There was like the Marshall Plan and so on. So some people came to senses and had good ideas. So the system we now live in is that in Middle Europe for like 80 years, there hasn't been a war. That is the longest time of peace ever in the Central Europe area. And, there was on the Balkan, there was something, but let's say here, Central Europe, in peace, really great. So I think we learned such a lesson, also like European Union, lots of efforts. Like also there's military projects here, sometimes you can see military projects of several nations like the Eurofighter project or other projects. You can see it's really a waste of time and money, but it's a peacekeeping mission because, imagine there's like 4 nations in the Eurofighter together building an aircraft together. They can't go to war with each other because they rely on the spare parts from the other nations. So it's absolutely impossible that these aircraft can be used in a war between these nations because they would have to support the other side with spare parts. And yeah, you see that we have somehow built a system here that in Europe we are not going to fight each other again really in wars. So which is really good. Yeah. So, but you could say there's like really the period is before World War I. War is like normal. Then we found out, industrial ways of killing each other. World War I and World War II, and really in the millions and absolutely enormous numbers of people who died. Yeah, so that was like a cut. And then let's go there, whereas like we just skipped the Korean War for the time being, but let's go to the Vietnam War. Now we have Vietnam, and in Vietnam, like the United States, really a superpower, is trying to conquer and control a country which is like third world. And The result is, after years and years and years, they pull out. How many US servicemen died? That figure is like quite exact. It's 58,220 US servicemen. And between millions of people died in Vietnam. Yeah. So the casualties are like, compared to the First World War and the Second World War for the United States, are absolutely small. So it's like nothing compared to the Second World War. But these casualties over a long time made the US pull out of Vietnam and say, okay, it's not really worth it. It showed that you're not able, as a large nation with a lot of industrialized background, you're not able to really control somebody who doesn't like to be controlled. Okay. Then the Soviet Union tried the same thing in Afghanistan, and they failed because the Afghans have a reputation for sending out all kinds of conquerors since Alexander the Great. And so there 15,000 Soviet troops died. Millions again of Afghans died in this conflict. But the number really was like 10 years or so for this conflict. The number of Russian troops lost there, or the Soviet troops, was quite low. Then we would say same thing is like Afghanistan and the United States. There, around 2,500 US servicemen died. In Iraq, the occupation of Iraq, it's listed that about 4,500 US servicemen died. So these figures are again really small, and then that led to that nation really pulling out of there and saying, forget it, I don't care anymore about Afghanistan. I just go out and pull my troops out of Iraq. I'm not willing to sustain this amount of people dead, my military personnel, which are, in the sense, if you look at wars like the Second World War, are like really, really tiny figures, but still thousands of soldiers dead. So now this is like this period where you could say, it really proved that a large nation is not able to really conquer and control a nation which really doesn't want it. And where like also the spread in culture is really big, like United States to Southeast Asia and so on, or United States to Iraq or Afghanistan. The cultural difference is just too great. And it really proved that, trying to make diplomacy with war and gaining country and gaining influence hasn't been in there. We had the Cold War, and where, there have been lots and lots of nuclear weapons. But really, why did they have all these nuclear weapons? They were thinking of effects of the Second World War. And you really have to think about this, that, people who have been in this war and experienced it, they were thinking that now Russia is going to invade the United States and vice versa. They were really paranoid. But now we have like peace, and it's like everybody understands that, I don't think really that anybody is from the United States has any ideas of invading Russia. Would you do that? For what? Yeah? You can have everything what you want on the planet by just buying it, but why would you invade Russia? Yeah? Why would the United States invade China? No. Yeah? Unthinkable. Yeah. So, and is Russia going to invade the United States? There are some films like the Red Flood, I think it's one called, and there was another one similar, where somebody was like trying to invade the United States. Yeah, which is like, no, it doesn't really work. How would you pull that off? So it's absolutely useless. And these doctrines they had in the 50s and 60s, it's all gone. We have like a quite stable world right now. So that's why everybody had these nuclear weapons. This reason is really gone, because, it's not necessary that Russia and the United States are fighting on any great scale. For what? Yeah? For what? It's nothing. So now we come to the Ukraine war, because that thing is now going to be something different, because we have already estimations. It's just estimations, and you can look up, it doesn't really matter, it's how much, but there is said to be between around 500,000 Russian troops have lost their life or wounded. So you don't really get exact figures about dead military personnel, but they said like 500,000 dead and wounded in that conflict. And so that means already, if you estimate like a figure to 1, 2, 3 between dead and wounded, and yeah, that differs, but that is going to be at least 100,000 dead Russian soldiers, at least, probably more. Yeah, and of course everything is fuzzy. We are in an ongoing conflict. So here we have now, in 2 years, the Russian troops have definitely lost several times over the amount of military service people killed in action in Vietnam. So several times over. At 2, 3 times, we don't know exactly, but several times over losses. Yeah? Maybe even much more, because everything is like still fuzzy. So that thing is completely different. And there again, Russia, tries to invade another nation to gain control of that nation. Are they actually going to hold it? If the real question here would be, well, if they would go to like a ceasefire or so and find any kind of solution, that they'll go from this war mode to like an insurgency type of mode, and the Ukrainians would fight the Russians for the next 10 or 20 years, they're probably going to drop out of that area if the Ukrainians are really going to stand and say, no, we don't want to have the Russians here. The only problem is sort of that, the countries are quite similar, and so maybe the people are just going to accept it. It really depends on the people. The people in Vietnam didn't really accept the United States to be controlling them, so they were fighting, yeah? Or the people in Afghanistan or Iraq, they didn't really like the occupier. What will happen in the Ukraine, we will see. I guess the conflict is going on, and we're going to make another video also on this conflict. But what we are basically seeing in Ukraine is that Russia is dumping all kinds of military material into this conflict, which they have large stockpiles left over from the Soviet Union. And we see that their navy doesn't really play a role. They have an aircraft carrier, which is like a joke. And, their navy didn't play a role. Everybody knows now their air force is like a joke. They still have lots and lots of rockets from anti-surface to air missiles and these kind of things. So they have very good air defense. But still, do you think Russia is now who is the superpower number 1 on the world? I would say it's the United States. Who is power number 2? And there's a big question. In the past, I would have said, yeah, it's Russia. Now, I'm tempting for China, because Ukraine is really defending very well, and they are the performance of Russia in China in the Ukraine, not that big, and they are dumping so much material there that you can say, okay, no, I wouldn't say that Russia is really a superpower, and it doesn't have to be. What for? Yeah. They don't need nuclear weapons. That's now the main thing. Let's do something about nuclear weapons. Go to zero-nukes.net and register, join, and let's do something about nuclear weapons, because they're completely useless. That was like the whole story of these wars, and nuclear weapons have been an answer to the question after the Second World War, like, okay, we have to defend ourselves from the next big thing. But now we come to it's like, there is not going to be really a big thing. We don't really need nuclear weapons. And by the way, we have lots of other weapons where we can hit an opponent really hard. So nuclear weapons are a lot of reasons why we don't need them anymore. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good time. And follow the channel.